All right. Good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. Good afternoon in the UK to my very good friend, Sarah Beale. I'm so excited to have you on board this morning and this afternoon. And yes, Sarah, I've known you for a couple of years now. We actually started out because you interviewed me for some work we were doing together with Lainey Liberté, who is the maven of world schooling here in Mexico. And so, yeah, I connected with you right away and loved since following you on a variety of social media and seeing all of the beautiful and very informative and very raw pieces that you put out regularly, talking about your world schooling, homeschooling, unschooling journey with your kids, your four babes. And so I wanted to invite you today just to hang out with me and have a bit of a romp into the world of unschooling and why you chose that route. And, perhaps maybe we can inspire some others that are looking for resources, nurturing, support in this realm. You've contributed to a number of books about parenting, mothering, and womaning in the world. And so, yeah, I would love for you to make reference to those as we go through today and tell us what you're all about.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm excited to chat about all my favorite topics. And, the first time that we chatted when I interviewed you, and I didn't really know much about you, I remember thinking, oh my God, I just want to keep talking because like we have got such a shared experience in terms of the way we see children and mothering and being a woman and the world. And I think we're going to talk about all of that stuff today. It's hard to sum it up in one sentence. I probably won't try, but definitely what I really enjoy to do is share my truth with other people, because when I was a younger mother, it was those stories from people who were a little bit further ahead on the path that really supported me and comforted me, let me know that like everything actually would be okay. And so like if that's all that people would get out of like following me or chatting with me, like I'm super happy, like everything will be okay. And it really doesn't have to be as hard as what we are sold.
Yeah. I love that you say that. And, I think of myself as a kind of a groundbreaking unschooling mama. Like 28 years ago, this was not being talked about at all. And, I just kept feeling this little impulse right inside my belly that said, you cannot coerce these children who you love with every fiber of your being the way that you were coerced, because the experiment for yourself did not turn out all that well. And so, coming to the determination that volitional learning starts to spark a relationship and a connectivity with our babes in ways that would never have happened if I had taken the posture of a false authority. And that was kind of how I boiled it down for myself. And I was free falling all the time. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I wasn't really doing anything at all except providing space and backing everybody off that was quick to criticize us at the time.
Oh yeah, like it gives another meaning to the idea of being this like mama lion. Like we're not protecting our kids from the things that many other people are scared of. Our kids are free to and nurtured to take all sorts of risks and try all sorts of things, but certainly sometimes it feels like we're like advocating for our life in a different way, and protecting them, I guess, from the opinions and judgments of others who would interfere, even if just with their negative thoughts and energy. And yeah, I mean, like I'm so grateful for people like you and other mums in my sphere of awareness who did that work many years before, because actually, like it's not even a big deal now to say like, yeah, my kids don't go to school. Like it literally just rolls off the tongue. And my kids are very effective self-advocates, and I'm sure yours grew to be as well.
Yeah.
I mean, kids naturally are actually amazing self-advocates when we let them. And I just feel like all that hard work of paving the way, and even just formulating what these words mean, like unschooling, self-directed education, whatever. Somebody else already did that, so I don't have to do that work. That's great. But I definitely think we've got some new challenges now, perhaps in the world, in the current climate. I mean, they're the same. It's not that they're new, they just look different. Sometimes it takes a little minute to realize that they're actually the same.
Yeah, well said.
Different costume.
Yeah, well said. So I'm going to ask you to take me back kind of to the inception, because I'm curious about what makes us these types of mama lions. And so what I've heard you say many times is that you felt it was really important to birth your babies at home. And
well,
yeah,
there was no other way. I didn't even think about it, actually. I often say, like, when people are recounting their birth stories, or they're talking about whether hospital or at home, and they had to put a lot of effort and thought into that, I kind of feel like I cheated because I didn't really there was no decision, quite honestly.
Yeah. And why do you think that is? What was it that made you feel there was no decision?
Well, my dad is English, and it was really typical up until the probably late 50s, early 60s to be born at home in England. There was a shift away from home birth, and you know, birth has really become another class issue almost, because I've done a little bit of research into I'm sure you have too, into birth culture around the world. England still holds a higher standard of care than countries like Australia and the US, interestingly. And I think that's probably because they did have a strong midwife-led birth culture here. I mean, there's lots of buts, but and so I was aware that it was really normal to have babies at home. People started to get shifted away from it. People who could afford to go to hospital started to choose hospital care, which is really interesting because that still can be a factor. But my dad was born at home. I always knew that. So it seemed pretty normal. My mum's a nurse, but an old school nurse. Yeah. You know, that very stoic breed of like, you just kind of get on with stuff. I mean, that's not always helpful, but there's elements of it that I really appreciate. And that is that she had a very good grasp of physiology. And when we were growing up, we just kind of understood, I guess, from my mum partly, that our bodies do actually work. So my mum was a nurse before this new truth of our bodies are actually broken and need constant intervention. That's not my truth, was that our bodies actually work. And you don't really have to do a whole lot to keep them in that shape, just not do super crazy stuff. And, you know, that's, I just assumed that my body would work, which it did.
Yes.
4 times.
Yes. It's a miracle, isn't it?
I know.
Yeah, I know. And it's the culture very much in North America. I find that you need to intervene and somehow manipulate that you didn't get downloaded as a whole being, and those reflexes at birth are not going to push a baby out unless you have some form of assistance. And we're starting to claw that back. And I so appreciate, you know, there's 90 million people in the world who use homeopathy, but the biggest population of those individuals are in Europe. You know, and so that's the thing, is that we're still re-educating the US and Canada that you don't need all of these tactics and manipulation and to pull babies out with, you know, different manipulations. So yeah, that's slowly coming back within our natural domain. Thank God.
Yeah, and I think what we're doing now is unpeeling all of that stuff, unlearning what we thought was true, and recognizing that these things that we've been told are normal about birth and a whole lot of other stuff aren't normal and never were. They've been normalized, and that, you know, it certainly seems to me that there's been an intentional agenda to actually put things into the birth process to make it seem like your body does not work. And of course, that this just gets perpetuated, doesn't it? One little thing that doesn't work, that sows the seed of doubt in someone's mind, which then is proof that it doesn't work. And then you're on the train.
Exactly. Well said. Well said. So how do you think this gesture of home birth and get on with it and, you know, figure it out if you have a scrape and, you know, you're good. Hard knocks are what life is about. And, you know, just buckle under and get her done. And then you allowed your children to self-educate from home. How is the gesture of birth and this way of being, you know, really translatable into the lifestyle you've created?
I mean, I can't, although two of my children did go to school for a bit, that was that was kind of a blip, if you like, although, you know, that's part of our story and part of our path, and I'm very grateful for that too. But I think what having the, you know, I'm just trying to think where to start. There are these, like, if you look back at your life, there are these like decision making points, aren't there? These things that are like, oh, I didn't realize that was a big deal, but actually everything kind of started from there. And having my babies at home, although it was normal and really not a big deal, actually that put me on a particular trajectory, I guess. Because it exposed me to certain kinds of people that I probably wouldn't have met if I'd had a different experience. It opened me up to questioning so many things that, even though I didn't question the idea of home birth because that did seem normal, just that decision meant that I had to do some extra work. You know, I had to do some extra research. I had to learn some different things. Tap into my intuition in a way that I wouldn't have had to if somebody else was in charge of my body and my birth. And so that did naturally then inform the next thing. And I guess because we had these uninterrupted birth experiences, it paved the way for everything else to be uninterrupted in a way. And so before we even got to school age, I had this experience of being able to observe my children without intervention. So, I mean, it kind of seems like maybe the birth stuff was like a metaphor for everything else. And partly because of who they are naturally, partly because of the kind of mother I am naturally, I don't know, all of that rolled into one. But I was able to see how kids are. So in the same way as I got to observe how birth is, I got to see how kids are. And really, like, and you know what, the interesting thing about initially deciding to send them to school, because I just simply didn't know anybody that was doing anything different. I did always have concerns about school. I always said when my kids were younger that I had a homeschooler's heart, but it just took me a bit to listen to it. And I needed those stories, I guess, which is, you know, we've got to just keep sharing this stuff so people know. And I did see what school does. Like, I got to see what it does to children when they are interfered with in that way. And that's been really interesting because I've got, for example, 2 children who were taught to read in school using, you know, the typical kind of explicit teaching methods that we know about. And then I've been able to observe 2 children learn to read completely unhindered, you know, at home by themselves. And that's been really interesting. And I'm grateful to have that comparison because I think it's probably just fueled my passion for self-directed learning and self-expression in an even deeper way, perhaps, than if I hadn't had the experience of seeing kids in school.
Yes. Yeah.
I
love that you say that. And it translates to everything when they get older as well, too. This is what I find is my kids are incredibly resourceful. as a result of volitional learning. You know, I said to my daughter, she was actually procuring a course for herself before she went in to become a paramedic. And I said, oh, do you need help with that, you know, financially or so? And she's like, Mom, why would I need help? You know, I'm an adult now. I figured these things out by myself. I'll get the course and, you know, I'll get some funding and I'll pay it back. And that's what you do. I mean, it's what you've always done. Why would you think I need your help? And I'm just like, oh shit, yeah, that's awesome. That's coming from that deep down embedded in her bones capacity to be motivated, self-motivating, volitional, you know, resourceful. I love that. I mean, that comes from when she said that she was really interested in doing a comparison between Roman and Greek gods, and she got 2 pieces of Bristol board and just completely outlined with bubbles and art and you know, crayons, and you know, just did a whole comparison. And I'm like, that is so cool. Like, I've always wanted to know that and never thought to ask the question or put the bridge together. I said, wow, can I sit and study that? Will you explain it to me? And you know, that's the thing that carries us through life. I've had to come to, you know, my latter part of my lives, my 30s, 40s, and 50s, to figure out that, wow, I'm a volitional learner now. I wish this had been embedded in me, you know, encoded deeper on, because I had to claw back and relearn even how to do that. Is it okay? Do I need permission? I mean, it was crazy the way my mind worked.
Oh, I think that's such a, you know, if there were to be a list of reasons to homeschool or unschool, because people ask you, don't they, what are your reasons? And I mean, it's a whole lifetime of explanation. I never realized that would be one of my reasons when we decided to live without school.
Yes.
That these children, all children, are self-motivated.
Yes.
All children are self-motivated, but we mostly don't see them living in that opportunity because they have it removed from them at birth. Their own drive, their own guidance, we cut it off. We tell them to stop listening to themselves and only to listen to other people. We tell them what they have to have for breakfast and what clothes to wear and if it's hot or cold and where they're going today and what activity they're doing and you know, what time they have to go to bed and what they're allowed to watch on TV and like how to say please and thank you and stop picking your nose and put shoes, like everything. Like, oh my God, to be a child now and to like when I'm out, we probably live in a bit of a bubble. Sometimes when we're out and I see other, and I don't mean to criticize other parents, but just to shine a light on some of this stuff, the way other parents speak to their children, just like constant. I'm like, fuck. I would go insane if I was a 3-year-old child in England right now with a typical upbringing, being told how to walk, how to not fall over, how to not run on the road, how to, oh my God, it must drive them insane. And you know what, you can see, you just stop thinking, what's the point? I mean, probably long before 3. And the things that they come up with when they have space, the questions, the conversations, that inbuilt desire to like do it for themselves, and they're not even thinking like, oh, I want to do it by myself, like they just do because of course, why wouldn't I? Which doesn't mean, by the way, that we never help them or support them, of course, because I mean, we do, we're always available, but my kids, particularly 3 of them, I would say, have a very, very strong desire to be self-supporting in that way. And actually, it always interests me, you know, like we get to observe our children, right? And I just find it fascinating just watching them. And sometimes I'm trying to figure out, oh, what's driving that? And so I do ask my kids lots of questions about how they are and how they come to these decisions, because I'm just curious that it's so different to how I grew up. And my 7-year-old, no, she's 8, she just turned 8. She just probably 6 months ago or so, we all noticed that she could read, basically, like she could read now. And this has been coming on for some time. She's very outwardly expressive. So we got to see how this was unfolding. Unlike my slightly older child who just woke up one day and could read, and we'd never really seen it developing. Peggy did everything outwardly, so we got to see it. So one day, you know, she's reading and I was like, you know, just curious about it and asking her how this had happened, and she didn't really want to talk. She didn't want to talk about it. And actually, she would read something or ask a question about a word, and I'd get really like excited, and she's basically found me really annoying because she's like, "Can you stop going on about it, Mum? Like it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Like why do you have to why are you so excited? Can you stop telling everyone?" Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it was so like, yeah, of course I can read. Like, why wouldn't I be able to? So different to what we're told children need, the constant bloody sticker charts and rewards and prizes for being the best and being on a special list at school. And we're told that children need that stuff to motivate them. They need these obvious affirmations, and they don't, and they don't even want them. And actually what sometimes my kids are telling me is that it's a bit annoying, and it might even hamper them, because actually the truth of it, when you are honest with yourself as a parent about why we want to do that stuff, it's because we actually want the reward for ourselves.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, which means that we're not actually recognizing deeply that like they did that. You know, so like your daughter, like she doesn't need you to go, "Oh wow, you're doing a course, well done, woohoo!" And here's the money. As you know, you're not doing that, of course, but like there's this kind of ownership, I think, that children who are raised with autonomy have. They've got the ability to carry their weight, and yes, sometimes they need help and sometimes they need support, but they don't want us to take their bloody accolades because they did. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I remember my son in the back of the car one day was sitting next to my daughter, who was still in a car seat, and we were going to an apple orchard for an outdoor fun excursion, and she says to me, "Mom, where do we come from?" And you know how you stop for a moment because you think, okay, what age is this child? What needs to be said? What is she looking for? And you know, you just kind of pause for a second, and Jordan yells up, "Mom, don't worry, I got this." And I thought this was so adorable. And so he says, "Well, Addie, I've been doing some studying recently, and I just want to tell you that we actually come from dirt." And she goes, "Oh, yeah, I guess you're right, Jordan. It's still under my fingernails." You know, and I just thought, oh, how graceful and eloquent, and so awesome that I kept my bloody mouth shut, because I could have gone in any direction, but yet they just figure these things out by themselves, and it's such a beautiful thing to witness. I know you have a million examples of this.
Oh God, I love the sound of my own voice. So when they ask me a question, I'm like, oh, here's my opportunity to show off my vast amount of knowledge, right? And we were going for a walk a couple of weeks ago with our friends that are currently with us, and we were walking across the fields. It was twilight, and there was a frog. The kids saw a frog, and there was a whole lot of excitement about this frog just in the field, and we were looking at it, and one of the kids wanted to pick it up, and then we were like wondering what kind of frog it was. And my friend, who's an unschooling mum too, she's like, oh, is this kind of frog, and starts launching into the whole and the kids were, you know, you could kind of see them eye rolling in the semi-darkness, and we were just laughing, her and I, about this desire, like, oh, I want to show off my knowledge about something, and you got to bite your tongue and let them do what they were born to do, which is seek knowledge the way we are now doing. You know, many of us, I think, through our unschooling journeys with our children, are reacquainting ourselves with that inbuilt ability that perhaps we were denied as young people when we had to listen to the older people who knew far more than we did. But that joy of self-discovery, you know, finding out information and feeling like you've uncovered it and no one told you, and it's amazing, and like we all deserve it.
Yeah, very well said. And I know that you are really well connected with our dear friend and colleague Lainey. And Lainey Liberté, as I mentioned earlier, is the world schooling maven. And I want to ask you personally how you feel world schooling has influenced you, and what is it, and what is that influence that you bring to your kids? Because you obviously have lived in a couple of countries now, and what does that bring to the unschooling volitional learning platform for you guys personally?
Well, this is an interesting question because my kids all don't love world schooling, actually. We are in like constant negotiations about what we're doing next and where we're going. But of course, unschooling, which opens up this idea that everybody gets a say, you know, because it's not just about education. In our family and many unschooling families, it's really just living. And as we are living with our children who have very strong opinions about how they might want to learn and what they might want to spend their time doing, they've also got pretty strong opinions about the rest of it too. So we know lots of different world schooling families who all do things differently. And some families are literally living on the road in a bus. They're fully nomadic. They're country hopping constantly or slowly, you know, whatever, and everyone's having an amazing time. And we did try that for a bit, and my kids were like, nah, I don't really like that. And funnily enough, I guess the biggest learning for me has been that as adults, we look at everything that's out there in the world and we're like, oh my God, that's amazing. We want to see all these amazing places. We want to experience it. There's probably, if we're honest, a little bit of like scarcity, like, or what if we don't get to do that later? We have to do it now. That's certainly something that's played out in my life. And actually, sometimes we could be anywhere. The kids really don't give a shit whether they're looking out the window at Lisbon or Spain or a rainy field in England, because they're just doing their thing.
Yes.
And it like they've actually been like underwhelmed in a way. It's like it's a big deal and it's not a big deal, like everything else. And so I think it's almost like, and I think other world schooling families potentially feel similarly. It's just no big deal.
Yeah.
Like everything's on offer, right? This is the thing about leaning really deeply into unschooling. There's no limits. All limits are self-imposed, even when we think they've been imposed on us. And kids just naturally don't have those same walls. Well, not when we remove them anyway. And so actually, like, I mean, we're in constant conversation about what we're doing next. We are at the moment too. And not everyone agrees. And so sometimes these negotiations, they sometimes feel like are lengthy. And they certainly have to be always like approached with what do we want? What do you want? How can everyone get what they need? And attempting most of the time to not impose our beliefs and our own truths on our children. And I think, you know, there is this idea that we want our children to experience everything. And it's almost the same as like a parent who maybe lives a more conventional life and their kids are in school and they enroll their kids in ballet and piano and gymnastics and horse riding and chess, and they want their kids to experience everything. The kids have to experience everything. They've got to know that there's this smorgasbord of options. And you can get pulled into that with world schooling as well, I think. Like, oh, what if we never get to go to, like, I don't know, can't even think of a country. What, like when we're in England at the moment and we haven't been to, well, I've been to London a few times, but my husband hasn't been to London for 3 years. Like, what if we leave here and we don't go to London again? Or what if we, you know, when we were in Spain, we never went to Madrid? And my daughter and I were just watching a movie this morning and there was a scene in Madrid and she's like, oh, they're in Spain. And I'm like, yeah, like we didn't go to Madrid. We did other things. So you can be fooled into this kind of scarcity, even when you are living this life that outwardly seems quite free and radical. And I just think we have to kind of, be honest with ourselves about our intentions and question this programming all the time that says you've got to do everything. Our kids have to see everything. because that's also based, that idea is also based on the fact that they won't find these things if we don't show them now. Like our kids, if we never enroll them in guitar lessons, they're never going to learn to play the guitar. Like, and those things they're not true, you know. Like if we don't visit all the countries in the world this year or next year, does that mean that they're never going to? Or they might not want to for a start, you know, and that doesn't matter either. You know, like attachments to ideas and how things should be. Yeah. And I feel like I didn't answer your question at all.
No, you did.
The main thing that has opened up for us is spaciousness, because whatever change you're making in your life, whether it's that you're going to sell your house and embark on an adventure, or whether it's that you're going to keep your house and go camping, whatever it is, you need to leave some stuff behind in order to move into something new. And that is really what world schooling and unschooling is kind of like all about: spaciousness, and what we choose, where we choose to invest our time and energy, and how we can open up to what the world has to offer us. And some people do that geographically by traveling in it. And at the moment, 2 of my children and their friend are quite enjoying doing that, playing Minecraft for about 16 hours a day.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And that's interesting that you say that, because my daughter loved to read big tomes, like big, fat, hefty books and she would clear through them within, you know, a matter of a few days. I couldn't do that. I've never seen anybody read like that in my life. And my son's like, why would you sit and read that boring shit hour after hour after hour? He learned to read in video games. Like that was his gig. And, you know, he was running in, I forget what it was called, something, not Minecraft, but Worldcraft. And he would have 200 kids all over the world following him into these battles together. And he'd be typing like a boss. And I'd be
God,
where the hell did you learn that skill? Like I had to go to typing class, grade 9, grade 10, and 11. I can type without looking at the keyboard, but he's learned that and fashioned it in a way that just really rocked his world. And he loved it. He loved it for years.
Yeah. Oh no, a World of Warcraft, I think, is the game you're talking about. Yeah. And I think my kids might be the wrong age, you know, like that was out when there was not as many games available. So these games, I think World of Warcraft is the same. They're so complex.
Yeah.
There's so much going on, and like that one in particular is very much about kind of role play, and you're really getting into the story and the character. And my kids tend to turn most games that they play, even if they might look a bit like one-dimensional on the surface, that's what they tend to do with them. And there's so much happening, and so much, like there's these backstories, and I mean, if you cared to, you could tick off pretty much all areas of the curriculum from one video game. Yeah.
So well said. And that's the thing is, like you said earlier, it hit on all of my triggers, that this is how he was engaging with this learning. And I was trying not to think, oh God, should I restrict the time he's on? Should I restrict the amount of time? And I thought, I can't do it. So I sat down beside him and I said, show me in detail what it is that you love about this. Like, what's happening? Take me through. And I'm going to sit here for hours. I'm sorry, but you know I may be curbing your style here, but I really am curious. I want to know. Next thing I know, I'm a character. I've got long blonde hair, different scabbards and swords, and I'm riding a lion, and I'm like, wow, this is super fun. Like I'm having a blast. And I thought, wow, now I really understand, and I can back the hell off because I'm not afraid anymore.
Yeah. There's so much fear around digital technology, and there seems to be a new sort of, it's taken on a new energy just in the last year or two as some new fears are being injected into that landscape, I think. And it is mostly that parents don't understand it, you know, in the same way as I guess potentially our parents didn't understand our world. This idea of the generation gap, I think, plays out, and it's very easy to manipulate that, as there is this well, we're told that there is this natural separation between these generations and parent and child, and you can't be a friend to your child, and you've got to have limits and boundaries and whatever, and it just reinforces that there is this separation and we can't possibly understand what they're doing. And of course, it's much easier to be afraid of something that you don't understand.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if any parent who's actually spent any time observing or playing with their kids in an online game would have any fear around it, because when you see not only the how deep they go, how deep they can follow their passions, but how they navigate the systems and how they build relationships, and how everything that they do in the online world like mimics what we do in the offline world in terms of meeting new people and how you build a friendship and how you hold limits and how you manage someone who's done the wrong thing and consequences and all of that stuff. It's the same.
Yeah.
And so you just have to watch what they're doing or talk to them about it to see that. And then there's no need to be afraid of it anymore.
No. And that was the interesting thing, is that he was a liege. And I said, well, how do you get this, accolades and position amongst all of these kids? And he said, well, I'm just a natural born leader, Mom. Like, don't you know that? And I just thought that was so interesting. And of course, at the age of almost 29, can you freaking believe it? Next month he'll be 29 years of age. He has brought that, to his trampoline acrobatics, to being a manager at the age of 20. He just translated all of those skills into his adult life. And I'm in awe of how that just, naturally unfolded, and was put in charge of a huge trampoline park, with many staff that had to be moved to the ball pit, to the trampoline pit, to this. And he was doing all of that on his own without any guidance at all, scheduling everybody. And I said, where do you think you got those skills? And he said, well, from my video games, of course, Mom. Like, it doesn't, why do you even have to ask,
We were actually at a trampoline park yesterday.
Yeah.
And I thought the kids would all want a slushie. So this is like a frozen, Anyway, so I paid for 6 children to have a slushie. And because the woman couldn't, it's not how I wanted to do it. The woman behind the counter could not understand anything. Like, she just couldn't be flexible about how this was going to work. So I'm like, okay, no worries. I'll pay for 6 slushies. Then the kids can come and say what they want. Well, only 3 children wanted a slushie in the end.
Yeah.
So then I paid £7.50 in excess of what we'd actually used. And she needed to phone her manager.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
So her manager came down, who probably was about 20, but I suspect not the same kind of 20 as your son. And my 10-year-old was standing next to me. So there was this big conversation about what they were going to do about this. My 10-year-old said, can't they just give us, because they couldn't do a refund. They didn't have the right button for a refund. My 10-year-old says, like, oh, why don't you just give us something to the same value as what we've spent? And honestly, they were struggling.
Yeah.
It worked out. We had to actually lead the whole way through this transaction.
Wow.
They could not. Yeah. And it comes down again to kids they are forced into, at a really young age, outsourcing their intelligence, their wisdom, their connectedness to their self. And obviously this is all intentional. But if there was to be a benefit of living outside of the school system, it's that kids aren't pulled away from themselves, and they actually are all leaders. They're all leaders. There's this idea that, it doesn't look the same as like some people are maybe supposed to lead a team and some aren't, but they're all leaders of their own lives and of themselves. And they're so tapped into what they want and what they need, and they're so certain. And sometimes it's really annoying because they don't want to do the same thing as me.
Yeah, totally.
And they're such leaders in their own lives that I can't lead them, and it's a pain.
Totally. Yeah. And that just gets more pronounced as time goes by, I find.
Oh yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah.
We often laugh, my husband and I, about when we eventually have 4 teenagers and then 4, children in their 20s. And yeah, I can't even imagine. It's going to be amazing
Yeah.
and
You'll need
exciting.
a fleet of cars because they're all going to be going in different directions.
I can't wait until they can all drive. Yeah, that.
Yeah, so awesome. Yeah, I remember asking Jordan, "Where are you going?" And he said, "Oh, can I use the car, Mom?" And I said, "Well, just let me know where you're going to be." And he said, "Oh, at the park. I'm training boys in parkour. We're going to be doing backflips and front flips." And my first, "Is that safe?" He goes, "Mom, I'll make it safe. So yeah, back off. It's fine." So yeah, and that's the thing, is they always operate out of a sense of distillated righteousness within themselves, because they have volitionally learned there's something in them that's baked in to choose something whole, healthy, fun. They're because my goal when I was a kid, because I was so manipulated from such a young age, um, I was always thinking, how can I go against these false authorities that are my parents? And I was often getting into, self-prescribed trouble as a
Yeah.
result. And when there's not that force holding the rope at the other end, out of their own volition, this is the thing, is they develop their own moral and ethical structure. And like you say, it's amazing how it comes out, calculating, how to deal with the slushy issue at the trampoline park, how to, really guide themselves through their lives and pay for their own courses. And I think that was the most surprising aspect to me, is that, when my daughter said, "I'm on this thing called Live Mocha. I'm teaching this kid English. He's Greek. And I wanted to learn Greek." I said, "You did?" And she said, "Yeah." So we actually sit for a couple of hours every day. I said, "Wow, I didn't know that. That's so cool." Like teaching each other a different language because you're interested out of your own volition then gets translated in to a whole other, let's teach children parkour, or let's help through being a paramedic. Like, it just kind of naturally comes out, because as humans, we love each other. And when we have not been coerced and manipulated and suppressed and palliated and all the rest of it, we come into a place of service.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, if there was to be, something to um aim for. I mean, I'm just trying to think how to frame it, because obviously a big part of our job as parents, a big part of our inner work, is to be kind of non-attached to an outcome. But it certainly seems, when I look at my own children and other children who are adults now, that we are so deeply connected to other people that we naturally don't want to do harm when we are living in a way where we're aligned, which we can only come to when we're allowed to kind of rest at that place and not constantly pulled out of it.
Yes, and be in competition, right? That's
Yeah,
what we're taught in
yeah,
school, is it's a sorting machine. So
yeah,
you're a smart kid, you're not such a smart kid, you're a medium kid, you're gonna work for the government then. And, you smart kids are gonna be diplomats. And, we're not sorted to compete with each other from a young age. And that's the thing, I think, that we're not then coerced into competitiveness when we choose our vocations later on, right? There's something naturally baked in an uncoerced human that naturally we want to give back to humanity in some, way, shape, or form.
I think it's hard for parents. I mean, it kind of seems, probably to other people looking in, that it's all a bit of an experiment.
Yeah.
That, like, I mean, the opposite is actually true, of course. But, like, how do you know? Like, what if that doesn't happen? Because actually, my children, varying stages. I mean, they're 8, 10, 12, and 14. there's definitely times where one or two of them are very, very firmly in their own ego at the moment. They are like, everything revolves around me and I'm taking care of myself. But, and we would see that, we talk about it a lot in our family. It's kind of interesting to observe. And I've also observed it in other children who also don't go to school, particularly at certain ages. So it seems to me to be part of a natural shifting, and then things sort of start to like settle a bit, and they start to look outward a bit more and notice their impact on other people as they grow, and maybe there's a bit of backward and forward in that. And our job is to kind of like trust. And again, we look to other people who share their stories, because in a community that evolves naturally, we would always have people older than us. There'd always be children around who are a year or two older, to show us the way, to guide us, to help us learn where limits are, and to share those stories. And we live less like that now, and so it can feel sometimes like, is this right? Are we going to be okay? Because my kid really wants to eat a lot of biscuits right now. Is it going to be, is it going to be okay? And that's the work. That's the hard stuff. That's the when do I sit on my hands? When do I go, hey, do you really need a whole bowl of Jaffa cakes?
Yeah.
I mean, that might be an example from today.
Well said. You mentioned that two of your babes were in the state-based school system for a time. What made you pull them and really start the full-time unschooling journey?
It was a combination of the reluctance I already had to send them into the school system. So I was very open already to the idea of something different, and I had concerns about school. I had been really lucky to have had my kids at home with me and not using any other kind of care. And so I got to see how they are and how they developed. And what I was noticing was very different to what we're told kids are. And I was really worried about interrupting that, like putting them into school. My oldest in particular, when she was my first one. So when she was coming up for school age, I was like a bit jittery about it. I'm like, actually, she was going to be going into a private school, like, a fee-paying school. And I had strong feelings coming up as we got closer. I'm like, yeah, this doesn't feel right. I feel like there's going to be too much control. This doesn't feel like it's going to be a good fit. So we changed our mind about that and put her in a local school around the corner, and like a government funded school, which actually seemed really lovely and a bit more community based. And it was okay, as schools go. It was probably what you describe as a lovely school, actually, to normal people. And I remember, but still, I had concerns, and she did too. And I remember, they have these things. They probably have them in Canada too, I guess. Like parent-teacher interviews, where like once or twice a year or once a term or whatever, I can't really remember. You go into school and you meet with the teacher, and they let you know how your kid's going. And I remember her teacher saying, like, she's doing everything that we expect. And my heart sinking, going, oh my God, this is what our life's going to be. Like, my kids are just going to do, like, she could, this particular child at that age was able to kind of mold herself into what they needed her to be. She was delivering everything that she needed to deliver. She wasn't rocking the boat. She was well behaved. She was tick, 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 tick. And I just kind of went, oh God. And then I said to her not very long after that, do you want to like homeschool? She's like, yeah.
Yeah.
But that was only for a year, and then she wanted to go back to school. That was the year we had our fourth baby, and it was definitely a pretty chaotic year. And she wanted to go back to school, and so we went back into the school system. And but still always had these I always had one foot out the door. We by then had homeschool connections. We by then had found some people, and knew that there was another way. And my second child was, while my first child was able to a large extent mold herself into what she needed to be, my second child absolutely, I mean, maybe he could have, I don't know, but he certainly chose not to. Like,
Yes.
there was no, yeah. And so that it became untenable. And maybe if we were a different family, we would have, because there are some people for whom that is the only option. Whether that's actually true or whether that's just their story, doesn't matter. Like, we go to school and we make it work and we push through. But because that wasn't us, because we were already very, very open to something else, and actually by then school was just a massive pain in our butt, to be honest. We were having to constantly like stop doing fun stuff to go. No one really wanted to do it. So it became untenable. The advocacy role that I could tell that I was going to have to slip into in order to stay in the school system, combined with the fact that I had a child begging me every single day to not go, because he already knew that his love of learning was dying. Like, he could articulate that at 7 years old, that they were destroying his love of learning. I mean, you can't ignore that.
Yeah.
You can't.
No.
I don't think you can choose to go, oh, I'm going to push through that.
Yeah,
No.
I agree. And yeah, I, as you know, treat trauma in my clinic, and that's a big one. So, you know, moms that say, that kids are dropped off and the teacher, you know, they're screaming as mom goes out the door, and the teacher goes, oh, no, well, they quieted down within 10 minutes. It was fine. And I'm just thinking, yeah, as the light goes out of their eyes.
Yeah, it does. And you know, I actually, I never put him in that situation. I just stayed with him. So, but he still had trauma. So I spent a whole year at kindergarten with him.
Yeah.
With my two younger children. So I would drop my older daughter at school, then we'd go down to kindy with my toddler and baby, and we would stay at kindy with him for a whole year.
Yeah.
So I didn't. Yeah. So I didn't leave him. People thought I was bonkers.
Yeah.
I'm like, why is his parents staying at kindy with their child?
Yeah.
But you know what I discovered in that year? How many other children did not want to be at kindy without their parent.
Yeah. Well said.
So, you know, the parent would drop them off. The kid would have a cry. The kindy teacher would tell the parents the kid's fine. The kid would be saying to me, I don't want to be at kindy and I'm really sad that I have to leave my mum.
Yeah.
So again, I was so grateful to have that experience. And I'm not the kind of mum that you can tell to follow your rules. So we just made our own, and we actually had we had a really fun year at kindy, and Miles actually had a really good time because I was there. He just needed me to be there. He didn't even talk to me. He was just like, hi, Mum, as he was running off with his friends. He actually had a great time, but he would not have had a great time if I had had to peel him off of me and hand him to the teacher. So he did still have trauma, but his trauma, and this is so interesting because he was able to verbalize it probably like a year or two after. He didn't even know he had carried it, actually. And, you know, you would see this all the time, I imagine, that something happens that releases the trauma, and the thing that or brings it to the surface, and the thing that's triggered it isn't actually really related to the thing that's happened, right? So it's kind of magical. So he hurt himself one day, so he had this physical trauma. And in the physical trauma, he was able to let out this pain that he'd been holding on to around school. And it hadn't really been about being left because of the way we'd handled it, but the trauma was related to other people trying to tell him what he had to do and who he had to be, and not being able to be like in charge of his own life. The pain of somebody else telling you how you've got to be and how you've got to live creates trauma.
Well said. And then it's baked into the body until something else triggers it. And then, on the law of cure, like cures like. If you hit it with the right dose, and it doesn't have to be a remedy, it can be an event. It can be something mirrored to you. Then it all cascades out. And you know, you see people walking around just, you know, at the shops, wherever, and they're like, they've closed down because they have been
they've been told they've got to be a certain way, and they've just had no option, or they felt there's no option, and it's all just stayed inside.
Yeah.
And their shoulders are slumped.
Yeah.
And they're grey, and
Yeah.
their eyes are like
And
there's no
they've
life.
been violated. Yeah, they look like they've been
And they look like
violated.
normal people, right? Going about their day. Mum's dropping kids at school, dad's going to work, someone doing the shop. They look normal.
Yeah.
But there's
Yeah, we study a lot in armoring, and that's the thing, is that the light goes out of the eyes, and the jaw, the mouth gets kind of frozen, and the face doesn't have that animating principle. And when they're moving, they're not gesturing. Like, children speak with their whole bodies, they cry with their whole bodies, they're joyful with their whole bodies. And you see so many people locked down underneath a prison of expectation and traumas that have occurred because of expectations and false authority bearing down on them. And look at the time we're in right now.
Yeah.
We have to be instructed and gaslighted and told how to be and what to wear on our faces and what to take into our bodies. Like, people aren't saying, screw you, you sons of bitches, because they've never had the opportunity as children to be fully volitional with regards to their own bodies and their minds.
Yeah, they've been trained into it. Like, the whole world has been trained into it.
Yeah, well said.
They don't even know they're in a cage.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And you said it so beautifully a little while ago, about that we do not need to world school or sandwich everything into the first 20 years of life, which is what allopathic education has done such harm and damage. It's like, yeah, you've got to get these tests done, you've got to be sorted, you've got to get, what are you going to do when you grow up? How, if you're not out of grad school by 26 and working your, I've treated so many individuals that have had mental and emotional breakdowns because they've just followed the script, right? Because it's not out of their volition. And suddenly they wake up in their 30s and 40s and go, shit, I never wanted this. And they completely come apart at the seams. And they're just like, I haven't got a fucking clue who I am, what I need, what I want. Nobody's ever asked me the whole of my life. Like, so damaging. It's so damaging. And that's the thing, is that to cultivate the love for lifelong learning. Speak to me about how you think about that term, lifelong learning.
I mean, I use the term a lot, and learning is not separate to living. So we have it's become separated in actual life and in language. And it's become like curriculumized. I think I just made that word up. Like geography, science, maths, reading, writing, everything. And, that's actually not how children or humans naturally learn. It's been like co-opted and commercialized. The idea of lifelong learning, to me, is just living, because we are innately so tapped into our ability to grow and transform and flourish, which naturally means learning. And it doesn't ever turn off, even when you sleep. We never need to rest from it. And the beauty of that is that we don't need to put kids into school when they're 5 and tick them off at 17 and go, oh, you're done now, move on to the next thing. And we don't need to stick to schedules or have holidays at certain times or go to bed at a certain time or start our learning at 9 a.m. and finish at 3. Like, all of that's a construct, right? And the idea of lifelong learning, I guess, if you're trying to like separate it, I mean, you're not obviously, from everything else, is a bit ridiculous, because of course we're learning because we're human. Yeah. And we're constantly taking in new information and exploring new ideas and throwing things in the air and seeing like where they land and what it means, and nothing means anything.
Yeah, well said.
Discovered a new breed of cow yesterday. That was exciting. We went for a walk. And when we were walking back over a peak, there was all these cows. This is just like in a public park, and the farmers there are allowed to graze their livestock in this park. And we're watching the sun go down, and right on the peak of this, I won't call it a mountain, that's overstating it, it's a hill, was like 20 English longhorn cows. These like massive, yeah, right on the, like they were silhouetted against the sunset. They were right.
Must have been magnificent.
Oh my God, it was so cool. One or two of the kids were a bit like, oh, they're like really big cows and really big horns, but it was pretty exciting. Anyway, my daughter and I were talking about it this morning. I'm like, oh, we've got to look up what's that cow. So you know, we just like looked up what the cow was, and we're like, oh my God, that's what they are. That's the breed, and you know, they're really weird looking actually and big. And, you know, then we finished and moved on to something different, and we may or may not ever think about those cows again. But, you know, just the thrill of just finding out a new little piece of information, and it's as simple and as completely nothing and as that. Yeah.
Super awesome. Yeah. I remember my daughter saying, how did God decide to make, like, what's the difference between a meat cow and a milk cow, Mom? I just think, you know, these questions are amazing. And the ability to question, you know, in my book, Self-Education for Excellence and Lifelong Learning, that's the thing, is that we're baked in exactly what you say, with this true desire to know, this curiosity that's just so baked in. And the questions, you know, when they're little, 4 and 5, you know, why is the sky blue, Mom? And why do cats meow? And how come all cats meow? And, you know, why do people have different skin colors? And all of these things just naturally come out. Well, when you let kids volitionally learn, the questions never stop.
Okay.
Whereas in allopathic education, the problem is at some point, they're so conditioned to sit still and not move and not talk out of turn that all the questions get suppressed, and then they stop asking them completely. And it's so damaging. You know, look at us even in our elder years as adults, like we're asking, like, okay, what kind of cow is that? And what kind of dolphin? Was that a bottlenose dolphin? And what kind of whale is that? And like, we want to know. We just want to know. And, you know, and we need to name things and look at them and discover how long have they been around. I mean, everything that we could possibly ever know is at our fingertips.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not even like, it's no big deal for kids, except when we try to stop it from happening, of course, which, as you say, happens in a classroom when a kid's got to wait till the end of the story. They're not allowed to call out with excitement. Then I remember being at kindy with my child that I was at kindy with a lot, and they were reading a story one day, and the kids were so excited about this story. They were laughing and calling out. The teacher was telling them they weren't allowed to laugh at the wrong time.
What?
Like, no, that wasn't the fun. And I'm like, what the fuck? You are. So, like, at 4 years old, they're being told what they're allowed to respond to and how, like, these programmed responses. I mean, literally, we are programmed into responding a certain way, unless we say no. And you know, we don't also need to answer everything. That's the other thing I find really interesting about natural curiosity. Like, I want to know what something's called, you know, like we saw a really cool caterpillar last week, and it was like really weird looking, very, very colorful, had spikes all over it. And my youngest daughter wanted to take photos of it so we could look up what it was, which we did, and we found out. And now we're constantly looking for the butterfly that it turns into. Still haven't seen one. And you know, it's nice to have a name, but like, they're not always wanting to like solve anything. Like, we've got this idea as adults, which is also a programmed response, I think, or an idea that we have to like conquer everything. We've got to like know all the answers. We've got to have it wrapped up. Is the earth flat or is it round? It's like really important for some people to know. I mean, I don't really care. And I'm not saying you shouldn't care, but like, kids don't always have to have everything wrapped up. You know, like, they ask a question before you've even finished looking up that one. They've got another question, and then another question, and then they've forgotten, and they've gone back to play, and then they're hungry, and then they've started to get a snack, and then they've forgot. You know, like, it just kind of rolls on, and we're like, but I didn't finish answering the question. Like, I really need to like know the, you know, like, we want to wrap it all up, and we want to go like, I have found the answer. And it's not true that we always have to either.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And sometimes I think it's just basking in the curiosity.
Yeah,
And the kids would say, "Mom, I'm bored." And I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, that's wonderful." Because out of boredom usually comes, like, if you sit with it long enough, is this awesome opportunity that you will wait for that inspiration. And I'm not going to solve, like, in my mind, I thought, I'm not going to solve this for you, sit with the boredom and see what comes of it, you know?
yeah. Oh, always great stuff. One or two of my kids will say that, and then it's normally just before they find something really
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah, it's true,
And
isn't it?
actually, one of my children, my second born, he knows this about himself actually, and he's able to articulate it, and he almost can relish in that feeling of boredom. And that's actually not something that I allowed myself to do until my children were out of school. Actually, we had this period where they just all seemed to be very self-sufficient at the same time. And when my youngest was probably like around 3, and they were just like all doing their own, they're all playing together for hours and hours and hours. And I'm like, and I wasn't having to make lunch boxes or like take people anywhere. We're just at home. And I'm like, fuck, I'm bored. And it scared the shit out of me because it
Yeah.
never happened to me in my entire life, because I'd
Mhm.
constantly filled it with stuff,
Yeah.
other people telling me to do stuff, me thinking I had to do stuff, the busyness of motherhood, some of which we just do because we don't know what else to do. And the idea like that I was bored, which was very confronting as like a 40-year-old. Whoa, for the first time in my life, no one's telling me I got to do stuff. And what a gift that we can give our kids, that
Yeah.
they don't have to wait till they're 40 to
Uh-huh.
have nothing to do.
Yeah.
Oh
Well
my
said.
God, a
Yeah,
whole
well
day and
said.
nothing to do.
Oh, and
Yeah.
I remember, like, when the kids, came home after they did spend about in school, the relief of not having to put shit into a lunchbox to me was paramount. Like, I didn't even realize how traumatic that was day after day to reinvent something, several hours in advance that wasn't gonna go bad and wasn't gonna kill another child with peanuts, like, it was
Oh,
just freaking brutal, brutal, brutal. So that
and
was,
it's boring. It's
yeah,
really
really
boring.
boring, isn't it? Yeah, setting them
I
up
don't
like,
want to do boring stuff.
yeah, I know, well
I mean,
said.
I'm okay being bored, but I don't want to do boring stuff.
Yeah, well said. And so this comes up in my practice a lot. I'm talking to a mom, or even a dad about, volitional learning and such. And they'll say, "Oh my God, Allie, how do you deal with no time to yourself? Like, you must go flipping insane. They're off the walls, they're bouncing off the couches, they're God, the kitchen's a bloody mess." And I know, because on Mondays I'm so happy when they go back to the state-based school, like, or they're off on holidays, and after 2 months in the summer, I'm actually almost certifiable. So, address this, if you will, how it is that you have self-care, that you run a business or several businesses from home, you write books and contribute to books. Like, how do you pull this off?
Mm. Um, Gosh, that's going to be a long one. So I think first and foremost, there are seasons in life. And I did uh, very much sink into that season of mothering small children. And for me, that looked like surrendering to what is. I
Mhm.
had 4 children pretty close together. And yeah, life was like pretty chaotic. There was constant snacks, constant dishes, constant washing, constant cleaning up of messes, constant trying to stop children drawing on the furniture. Like going out to, like, having to take all the stuff and pack all the stuff and then go to the thing and then come home. And it was busy. It was busy, and I really appreciated my morning coffee.
Yeah.
I still do, which isn't really about the coffee, by the way, but it's about that, like, oh, I'm having my cup of coffee and the angels are singing to me and I can't hear anybody screaming, and it's amazing. And you get really, really like efficient, I think, as a mother of small children, at recognizing those small opportunities for what maybe we call self-care. And yes, sometimes it feels like you're just kind of like getting through the day. with these very small moments. Or maybe the kids are all playing. No one's asking me to do a puzzle right now. I don't have to wash a nappy. I've got 5 minutes to have a cup of tea, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And, I had a beautiful village of other mums around me, actually, when I had in Australia, and we all looked after each other in that way. So I highly recommend finding a village. But, as the kids get older, things naturally shift. The space that you have in the day might go from being 5 minutes for a cup of tea to, oh, it's an hour and no one's interrupted me. And, when you aren't in the school system and life isn't as predictable, you often don't know when that time's going to appear. So that can be challenging. Like, it probably only a year ago, there's no way I would have got through this conversation without at least one person coming in. Yeah. And they're not doing that right now. That doesn't mean that won't happen again in the future. So, I notice those things and I appreciate them. I don't necessarily always expect them. But, the biggest thing I would say, and I don't have this completely nailed yet, but, that idea of creating this life that you don't want a holiday from, right, translates into motherhood. Create a life, build a life that you don't need to constantly build, or like you don't need to constantly escape from into these self-care activities. Because actually when you are a mum and you're busy and that chaos is real, going and having a massage for an hour, that is not going to touch the fucking sides. Seriously.
No. Yeah, well said.
I remember people would give me massage vouchers every time I had a baby. I'm like, are you for real? You can't have a massage when you're going to, like, literally.
Babe, like, how do you get them nursing while you're on the table? Yeah.
Anyway, they didn't have children, bless them. So we keep trying to put a Band-Aid on stuff, and this self-care thing, to me, when we separate it from life, feels like a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
And it's not that those things can't be important. Like I have had massages now as a person of older kids. I've had massages and they're great. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, and I'm not saying you shouldn't look after yourself, but it's really nuanced. And on top of all of this is a deeper conversation about how we live. And by and large, we have been tricked into giving up everything that sustains a thriving life. And we've, like, without even knowing it, we've swapped it out for a couple of weeks holiday in the sun.
Yeah, well said.
And we're told that's self-care. And that's a fucking lie.
Yeah, well said.
So, it might look like there are days where I could go for a walk for an hour with my dog and by myself, and I would call that kind of meditation. I get to think and talk and look at the birds and look at plants and whatever. But in isolation, that is literally just a Band-Aid for many, many other things that need to be considered to craft the life that we all deserve, which is to be surrounded by community. It's to be, with our kids. It's to be able to make decisions for our own lives. It's to be able to take responsibility, but also to be able to, commune with others in a really meaningful way. It's to not have the pressure of having to get to an office and do this and do that and get the kids to school and get the washing done and tuck everyone into bed so you can sit down and have your self-care,
Yeah, well said. And I think very much that's a state of mind. Like if my life is a moving meditation, I'm always in self-care. Right? I'm always asking, Allie, what do you need right now? Yeah. And that's the thing, is sometimes it's bending down and looking into my child's eyes, because I know if I can truly connect with them, I'm going to eliminate so much damage control where I'm going to feel like I get at 8:00 at night and I'm just completely spent. Because if I parent in a certain way where the child has volitionally unfolded themselves, there's so much less damage control that I need to escape from.
Yeah. 100%. And I still, last night actually, it was 10:30 and we'd been out, we got home, and typically our bedroom is like, it's also where my 8-year-old spends most of her time, and there was like texters, drawing Playmobil. She'd cut a doll's hair in bed, so there was hair from a doll on the bed. It's just like, and we've got to like sort that out every night before we get into bed. So like my husband and I is always, yeah, it was on my husband's mattress actually. I'm like, sorry, Dylan, there's probably some doll hair in your bed. So by the time we got into bed, and my 8-year-old sleeps next to me, and my 14-year-old was in there as well, and I'm like, oh, I just want to like, guys, can you like, I just want to switch off. They want to like, I just want to switch off. Like, I'm clocking off. And Peggy says like, I don't want to go to bed yet. I'm like, do you know what? I don't really care what you guys do. I just don't really want to have to do it with you. So I still like, as much as I talk about, crafting this life, there are still times where I'm just bloody knackered, right?
Yeah,
and I'm not sleeping very well actually because of hay fever. Hay fever. And mental note, talk to Allyson about hay fever. I was just tired, and I feel like it's reasonable at 10:30 at night to be tired and go like, I'm kind of done now. So that still happens, still there are times where as individuals, we've got to have strong limits around like, what do I need to do in this moment? And in this moment, I just actually don't really want to have to be helping someone else brush their teeth or getting a drink, but I just don't want to.
Yeah,
so
I'm done, cooked,
but
finished.
But when they were 2, obviously it was different, because this is what I'm talking about with these seasons. If you're in relationship with your children, and it's not perfect, and this is not a perfect science, but like you've got to know, like an 8-year-old can get her own pajamas on. 2-year-old probably can't, so things shift. And I am now at a stage where I can have different personal limits than I could have when I was breastfeeding.
Yeah, well said.
And changing nappies and whatever. Yeah.
So when my bath was my place of sacred, self-care and nurturing, and that had to happen every day. So when the babes were still on the breast, they would come in the bath with me, and that was a thing where it's bath time, and then eventually I realized, wow, I'm getting to bathe by myself. What a thing! And I'm not even sure when that happened, but it just became part of the family ritual from day one, just because it was how I needed to unwind and get some essential oils in there. And
actually my husband used to it was only possible when the kids were young, it was only possible to do it like on a weekend. So Dylan would always, as much as possible, get up with the kids so I could have that extra, like, if because I'd been feeding a baby through the night, I would sleep really, really soundly between like 5 and 7 a.m. So Dylan would get up with the kids so I could have a little bit more sleep. And I slept deeply for like that hour. It was amazing. And then he would, on the weekend, he would say, oh, do you want me to run you a bath? He goes, oh, he would run the bath hot. So I would get in the bath hot because I love a hot bath. And then the kids would jump in when the water cooled down.
Yes.
Yeah. With me, so there'd be like me and 3 or 4 kids in the bath, but I'd had maybe even just 15 minutes in the bath,
and it's enough,
and it was enough, and that's how I got through those early. And now, like you're saying, now I have a bath by myself.
That's amazing.
And most of the time no one even comes in,
and they're not even interested, and that's the thing. By the time they're 24 and 28, like my kids, they don't even call you anymore, let alone show up at the bath door. So it's a self-weaning process, and they get there. It just takes time. So what resources have your kids asked for volitionally? Like, Mom, I need this. This is what I'm interested in. Based on their individuality, each child asks for different resources at different times. What would you say has really kind of been rocks of resources in your household that you would highly recommend as an unschooling volitional mama?
I wouldn't recommend getting your kids anything until they ask you for it.
Yeah.
Don't waste your time on the beautiful, German wooden rainbows. Maybe they like them when they're 2. Don't like they will tell you what they want. I remember when this idea of strewing, which is very popular in the homeschooling community. It's where, as a parent, you buy a resource and you just like leave it lying around. in the hope that your children, no, don't do that. Just save yourself the money and then reinvest that into Minecraft coins. My kids will say what they need. They sometimes have their own money so they can get their own stuff if they want. Sometimes they don't, and they've got to say, oh, can I have such and such? There's been all sorts of things over the years. There's things evolve. Like when they were little, they loved to play with these like animal figurines, these little German-made animal figurines. We had hundreds of them, and we've still got them. Actually, we've kept them there in Australia. And when your kids like something, you might decide it's worth investing in that. But again, detachment, like in all things, as much as you can, because you can fall into these like trends or watching what other people have got and thinking you need them, and maybe they look really stylish on the shelf. And then the kids don't want them, and then you're like, why did I buy that? And maybe you've got a bit of shame because your kids aren't playing with these beautiful stylish toys. They just want to play with plastic from the supermarket. And it really doesn't matter. When kids know that they can have their needs met, they are not shy in telling you what they want. So there's not one thing, but there's been many things. And my oldest asked for a guitar last year, so she got a guitar. She doesn't really play it, but sits in the bedroom. Maybe one day she will. She had a bit of a fiddle around with it. My now 10-year-old wanted to learn the drums, so he had some lessons. We borrowed some drums, then he didn't play them, so he doesn't have drums. Dodged a bullet there. My 8-year-old, and we don't live anywhere permanently, by the way, so that's the other, like at the moment, that's the other factor. My 14-year-old wants a sewing machine. Is that like feasible, a traveling sewing machine? I don't know. My 8-year-old loves lipstick and plushies and slime, and so there's a lot of that in our house at the moment. I guess the important thing is, and this is definitely work that I had to do, that there isn't nothing has more value than another thing. Like we love as parents, especially as homeschooling parents, even to imagine that one type of activity or one type of investment is worth more or more important or more educational than another thing. And kids don't see it that way at all. So like, a Meccano set, because it's going to teach them to build, and you've decided that that's a worthwhile thing to spend money on, isn't any more important to them than downloading Minecraft for $30. Parents can feel a lot of pain and shame around this stuff. Like, but I really thought that they would love such and such, and so I bought this thing, and now they don't. And it was educational, and kids could give two shits about what we is educational. We've just got to trust them.
Well said. We just have to trust them.
Have to trust them. And sometimes my kids love buying stuff. Two of my kids in particular, they love buying stuff for sure. And so sometimes there's a little bit of like negotiation around, like, do we want to be homeless or do we want to buy the stuff, and the whole spectrum, right? So it's being in dialogue and conversation, and I'm not saying you should send yourself broke to buy your kids all the lipstick, but like, buying them these beautiful fancy watercolors because you've decided that that's what they should have, compared to letting them play around with makeup if they want, for example.
Well said. And that's the thing. Eventually things have to be culled, spaces have to be reined in to some degree, or we can't walk from one room to the other. It's just a fact of life. Like, how do you handle, and that's the thing, is that the boundaries around these things, sometimes you're just like, I remember thinking, oh my God, I am going to lose my fucking mind if we just don't, like, today, make it a little bit of a cleanup day, please, I beg you, I get to this point where I was just so frazzled because the chaos would, provoke and trigger me. I was raised by somebody who was meticulous, and of course you could perform surgery in the house I grew up in.
Well, we've all got our tipping point. Yeah. And there's always this with any of these triggers, as you use that word, so I'll launch off of that. What do we need? What do I really need to be okay? And what's actually part of my own programming, or maybe my childhood wounds or trauma? So, and actually tidiness and cleanliness was one for me too, because my mum was very tight, and we had to put things away, and we got in trouble if we didn't, and we had to clean our room every week. So I had to work that out. Like, I actually do enjoy things being tidy. I feel at my best, but I've actually got a really high tolerance for mess, because I happen to live with 5 other people who don't really care, and a dog, a long-haired dog.
Yeah.
So I could tie myself in knots trying to keep everything clean, but I'd miss out on a lot of fun if I did that. And I'd also be fighting with 5 other people a lot, because it's not important to them. It is important to me to a point. And yeah, I've had to do some work on that. Like, does everything need to be put in the dishwasher straight away? Or actually, is it going to kill me to just leave a glass there? And I actually really enjoy now, just like standing up and leaving my teacup next to the table. Sometimes I don't even put it in the dishwasher.
Yeah.
And I'm
Sometimes you just refill it.
Sometimes I use the same cup twice. And I, even 2 years ago, it would like, oh, can't we just pick up the cup? Just pick up the cup. Why do we have to leave the cup? Was it important? And I'm not saying that it's going to be different for everybody, but like, what is actually my programming? What's been put into me from somebody else that's not really mine? What's a response to maybe being punished as a child for not putting stuff on the sink? And what's genuinely me? What's really me? And that's a work in progress. And again, we go through stages, don't we, as our children grow, and sometimes they happen to be in a phase where they're really not playing with stuff. They're all just doing their own thing, and no one's playing with any toys, and it's tidier. And then there'll be an explosion of like, the Lego comes out and the Playmobil must be played with in the hallway, and so you're like, after you've been a parent for a few years, there are ebbs and flows.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
One thing we did do, because we were both working from home and we had a farm with 36 animals, and people were coming in and growing their veg in our yard, and it was there were certain things that we created community about, and that was preparing food. So Sundays I would get into the kitchen, turn some, music on, start singing, cutting up stuff. I would actually fill 2 crock pots, just because that was the only way I could serve patients, and be also available if the kids needed, as a resource for their own volitional learning, and also take care of a farm. And we would do this as a family. We'd also have laundry folding parties. That a chime would go off and we'd all come into the living room, and everybody would throw the laundry of the other person at them, in a pair of underwear on a head, or, all of this would happen. I didn't care if the laundry ever ended up in drawers. I don't even think one of my kids had a chest of drawers. As long as the laundry basket with clean clothes ended up back in their room, or sometimes in their closet, woohoo. But it was a sense of community that we ended up creating that worked really well for us and our family. And that was everybody. Even the 2-year-old had a dull knife to cut up carrots or parsnips or whatever to go into one of the crock pots. And that was a tremendous sense of community. And it helped me out so much. And the kids are fabulous cooks now as a result, I think, of that community-based, fun-loving, event that occurred weekly in the house. Do you incite help, like when they get into 12 or 14? Like, do they start to just naturally participate in the goings on of the community of the family?
Yes and no. So I'd say 3 out of 4 of my children loved when they were younger to chop vegetables, make things, help me. They had their own knives. One of them, don't think he even knows where the drawer is. Not sure if he's ever held a knife. It's just not interested. There'll be no point in going, hey, do you want to help me cook dinner?
No.
Although actually in saying that, he did a few weeks ago, and he's like, oh, this is actually really fun, because he was motivated, because he wanted to eat something in particular. That was what that was all about. What I'm always conscious of is not interfering with their internal motivation. And that's no simple task, because in a busy family, it might work for some people to have kids helping out, because that's just how it has to be. It hasn't had to be that in our family. And so there's been varying degrees of kids helping, and me going, I don't want anyone to help me, because I just want to get it done. And actually this came up recently. My husband was like, why don't we make the kids do the dishes? I'm like, I don't want them to help me do the dishes. because when they were little and he was working until like 7 or 8 o'clock at night, the last thing I wanted was to still be in the kitchen at 9 o'clock in the evening with 4 children helping me do dishes.
Right.
I just wanted to get it done. And I quite like just getting it done, going tick, move on to the next thing. It's just one of those things that it's not been a big deal for me. A few weeks ago, my husband was like, I really want them to start helping out, because we did when we were kids. I'm like, you know what, you sort that out. That's cool. You work with the kids on doing the dishes. So then he gave them a lesson in loading the dishwasher, and it was hilarious. And we had a lot of fun with it. But I do believe at the end of it, he said, yeah, I think you were right. I guess the key for me in all things is, first of all, knowing that there's no one perfect solution, and I'm not aiming for that.
Yep.
And what works in one family is not going to work in the next family. Even the idea of things working should be challenged as often as possible, and not having attachment to how things should be.
Yes.
So when my child, my youngest had her own, I'm just trying to think of the most recent example. She loved chopping, and actually she was one of these kids who just would not sit still, and the only way I could get a meal done was if she was in the kitchen with me chopping, because she just needed to be with me doing stuff. She wanted to be with me, and she wanted to be busy. So she would just chop in, whether it was going to go in the dinner or not. I'd just give her a knife, just chop some stuff. Good. If I had an attachment that was going to translate to her continuing to help me in the kitchen every day, I'd be probably pretty disappointed right now. She'd rather be playing.
Yeah, understood.
On the other hand, this week she made scrambled eggs, and she was really excited by that. And she's like, oh, that was really fun. She hasn't done it again. I don't know if she will. My 14-year-old used to love baking and cooking in Australia. She lived in the house that she grew up in. She was very familiar with the kitchen and the equipment, and she made all sorts of things. And then we pulled her out of her comfort zone. She had 20 different kitchens in a year, and she very rarely cooks now, but said to me this week, oh, I really want to get back into baking, because she's been kind of dabbling in that again. I'm like, cool. And again, it comes down to non-attachment, and me not racing out and buying her $100 worth of baking equipment in the hope that she now goes back to baking, because that's the other thing that homeschooling mums love to do. That, my kid's interested in something, I'm going to go and get all the subscriptions.
Yes.
And there is nothing that kills a kid's like passion for something that they've mentioned one time than the parent coming back in with like the expectations. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but it's, for me, it's I find myself pulled into very easily attachment to outcome. If I do this is going to happen.
Right.
If I teach my kids this, they're going to do this, and they're going to be this kind of kid. So I, as a way of holding myself accountable, I frequently and regularly go, oh, hang on, what does that actually mean? And what, do I want to burden my children with an expectation of them being a certain way? Which doesn't, by the way, mean I don't get to hold my own limits, or that I don't ever get to ask for help, or that I don't say, hey, can you please bring your rubbish out of your bedroom, or can you put your plate in the dishwasher? Because those things actually do happen. But not having an attachment to things having to be a certain way, which can then lead to suffering in us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Sarah, I have loved having you here with me today. We've been going at this for 90 minutes. Are you kidding me? Like, how did that time just fly by? And I didn't even have a cup of tea to offer you. And so tell me, love, you are an accomplished writer. You blog regularly. I want you to tell me what it is that you do for your own business and share it with our audience, how people can, reach you as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got my fingers in a lot of pies, as you know, and they're all related to taking full ownership of our life as a family. So I've been busy building multiple income streams. I've been writing in books, which has really been very much about my own passion for writing, but also building my networks and connecting with other people who share those passions. Lainey and I run group programming or group mentoring coaching for parents who are like us, but perhaps a few years ago. So we support parents that way. You can contact me about what we've got coming up. The work that Lainey and I do is very much about deprogramming, I guess, and supporting parents to partner with their children and giving them the tools to be able to do that. Because, as you know, so much stuff comes up for us as adults when our children push on those hurts, and they can make it feel hard to trust our children, because essentially we often have been trained out of trusting ourselves. So that's the work that Lainey and I do there. I'm also an affiliate for a company called Enagic, and they make water ionizers.
Cool.
That's my main thing. That's also something I'm really passionate about, because that's about drinking amazing living water, but it's also about helping families connect to financial freedom, which is important, because man, the fear is like coming in thick and fast around cost of living and the banking system. And I'm seeing people all over the world really like paralyzed, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to live? How am I going to earn money? And at the same time feeling like they want to be free from these systems that are really controlling us. So that's what I do.
Yeah, awesome. And so how do people reach out, and where's a good touchstone for them to make contact with you?
I mean, I'm most active on Facebook. And actually, I really should change my name back. I changed my name on Facebook to Sarah Lou. But I'm going to change it back to Sarah Beale as soon as I figure out how to do that.
Yeah, understood.
So that's
funny that we have to take on a number of iterations on different platforms, because we've been eliminated for our free thinking in so many.
And that was the reason why.
Mm-hmm.
That was the reason why I've got 2 accounts on Facebook, actually, for exactly that reason. One always needs to back up.
Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And for things that were even publicized by government reports, I've been taken down. So it's an insane time. Yeah, insane time we live in. Thank you, my love. I am so thankful that just to have this time to connect with you. I'm trying to think also right now of other things that we could talk about together, because this was too much freaking fun. And you know how much I admire you and respect you. And
Thank you so much.
So awesome.
This was just like having a cup of tea in the kitchen with a friend. Brilliant.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks,
my love to you and your tribe. You take good care.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, look forward to that.